The sun set over the distant horizon, casting an orange glow over the alien landscape. Marcus, a human soldier, stood on the balcony of a high tower in the palace of Kellerus Prime, a world far from Earth. The air was thick with the scent of alien flowers, their soft petals glowing in the twilight. It was beautiful, but Marcus couldn't shake off the tension in his chest. He was part of a diplomatic mission to Kellerus Prime, sent to strengthen relations with the alien royal family. The princess, Ilara, was known throughout the galaxy for her intelligence, beauty, and commanding presence. She was also known for her fierce belief in the superiority of her people. Marcus had heard stories of her sharp tongue and quick wit, but nothing had prepared him for her challenge. Earlier that day, Ilara had invited him to the royal training grounds, where warriors from across the galaxy practiced their combat skills. She had looked at him with a mischievous glint in her eye and declared, "I hear humans are strong, but how strong are you really?" Without waiting for a response, she had drawn a sleek alien blade from her side and offered him one. "A duel," she said, "to test your strength." Marcus hesitated. He had no desire to fight, especially against someone of Ilara's skill, but this was a challenge, and his training as a soldier meant that he couldn't back down from one. He stepped forward, taking the blade with a steady hand, though his heart raced. "Let's see if you can survive this," Ilara said with a smirk. The duel began, and the air was filled with the sound of clashing blades. Marcus was fast, but Ilara was faster. She danced around him, her movements graceful and fluid, as if the very air responded to her. Marcus found himself struggling to keep up, but he refused to let his guard down. Every time he thought he might have her, she was already one step ahead. Then something strange happened. As Ilara swirled around him, she caught sight of something that made her falter for just a split second. Her eyes widened, and her movements slowed. She froze, staring at Marcus's arm in disbelief. He hadn't noticed it before, but his sleeve had shifted just enough for Ilara to see it. The tattoo. It was a simple design, a swirling pattern of lines and shapes, but it was the significance of the tattoo that made Ilara stop. This was no ordinary symbol. It was the mark of an ancient human warrior, a bloodline believed to be long extinct, a bloodline that had defeated an empire similar to Ilara's people, long before the stars were mapped and the empires of the galaxy rose to power. Marcus could feel the shift in the atmosphere. It was as if the ground had suddenly become unstable beneath his feet. He looked at Ilara, whose face had gone pale. Her blade lowered slightly, her eyes fixed on the tattoo as if she had seen a ghost. "Well, what is that?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. He didn't want to explain it, but he knew there was no avoiding it. The tattoo had been passed down through his family for generations. It was a symbol of something that had been hidden for centuries, a story only spoken of in hushed tones among his ancestors. "It's a symbol," Marcus replied carefully. "A family mark." Ilara's eyes narrowed. She didn't look convinced. "A family mark? It's more than that. That symbol, it's from the legend, the one that my ancestors spoke of." Marcus stiffened. "You know about it?" Ilara's gaze remained fixed on the tattoo, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity in her eyes. She took a slow step back, still holding her blade loosely in one hand. "The legend of the last human warrior," Ilara murmured, almost to herself. "The one who defeated an entire empire and disappeared without a trace." Marcus felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. He had hoped that this part of his past would remain forgotten, but now that it had come to light, he knew it couldn't be ignored. "That's just a story," Marcus said, his voice steady, though his heart beat faster. "A myth passed down by my family. It's nothing more than a tale." Ilara didn't seem to hear him. She was still staring at the tattoo as if trying to make sense of it, as if the very sight of it had unraveled something inside her. I don't believe you," she said finally, looking up at Marcus. "This symbol, it's too perfect, too exact. The legend says that it's the mark of the last human to wield unimaginable strength. That symbol should not exist." Marcus took a deep breath. "It does exist," I'm proof of that. He could see Ilara struggling with the information. She was no fool. She understood the implications of what he had just said. If the legend was true, then humanity might possess a power that no one had known about for centuries. Ilara blinked, and for a moment Marcus thought she might back away. But instead she squared her shoulders, regaining her composure. "You're a human," she said, as though testing the words. "And you carry this power?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't need to. The tattoo on his arm was all the answer Ilara needed. Ilara looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She stood tall, trying to regain her royal confidence, but the cracks were visible. "I'll want to know more about this," she said finally. "But for now, the duel is over." Marcus nodded. The tension between them was thick, but it wasn't hostility, at least not yet. It was something else, something neither of them could quite name. And for a moment, in the quiet that followed, Marcus wondered if this was only the beginning of something far bigger than either of them had anticipated. The following morning, Marcus found himself once again in the grand halls of the royal palace. The air was thick with the scent of alien flowers that bloomed near the towering windows. The palace, a place of luxury and grandeur, now felt foreign, to him in a way it hadn't before. He wasn't just a visitor anymore, he was something more, something that made the princess uneasy. After their brief confrontation in the training grounds, Ilara had demanded to speak with him in private. Marcus had tried to brush it off, thinking it was just a moment of shock, but he knew better. The tattoo had shaken her deeply. It was clear now that it wasn't just a mark of his family, it was something far more significant. As he walked through the halls, Marcus couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling in his gut. He had always been a soldier, focused on duty and survival, but now he was walking into something bigger than himself. His past, buried for years, had come to the surface, and Ilara was the key to unlocking what it all meant. When he reached the royal chamber, the guard stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Inside, Ilara stood by the window, her back to him. She didn't turn around as he entered, but Marcus could feel the tension in the room. There was something different about her today. The princess was never one to show weakness, but now there was an air of uncertainty around her. "Marcus," she said, her voice calm but firm, "I need to understand what I saw yesterday." Marcus took a deep breath and stepped forward. "I told you it's just a family mark, a symbol passed down through generations." Ilara turned slowly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. "I've heard the stories, Marcus. I've heard the legends my whole life. The tale of the human who destroyed an empire. The story of a bloodline that vanished. But you're standing here in front of me wearing the very symbol. How is that possible?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. He had never spoken about his family's past to anyone, certainly not to an alien princess. But Ilara was not just anyone. She was the crown princess of Kalaris Prime, and her kingdom had a long history of war and conflict with other races. Her people were proud of their strength and power. To hear her question the very foundation of her beliefs was unsettling. "Look," Marcus said, his voice steady, "it's not something I've ever been proud of. My ancestors' actions were, well, complicated. The story goes that he was a warrior, the last of his kind. He faced an empire that was just as powerful as yours, maybe even stronger. And he fought them off, but in the end it cost him his life." Ilara stepped closer, her eyes searching his face. "And your tattoo is the mark of this warrior?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, it's a symbol of his strength. But it's more than that. It's a reminder of what he did, what he sacrificed. My family has carried it for generations, but it hasn't always been a blessing. It's a reminder that my ancestor didn't just defeat an empire. He caused the destruction of something much larger." Ilara's expression softened for the briefest moment. "But why keep it hidden? Why not tell the world the truth about this warrior and the power he held?" Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. The truth was complicated, and he wasn't sure if Ilara would understand. The tattoo wasn't just a symbol of victory, it was a reminder of the cost of that victory. His ancestor had not only defeated a great empire, but he had also brought ruin to countless innocent lives. That kind of power, that kind of legacy, was not something to be celebrated. It was something to be kept secret. Because it's dangerous, Marcus said quietly. The power my ancestor wielded, it wasn't just strength. It was something else, something that could change the course of history. I don't want that. I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Alara's eyes darkened. But if what you say is true, then why are you here? Why are you working with my people if your bloodline could be so dangerous? Marcus could see the conflict in her eyes. The princess was torn. She was proud of her people, proud of the empire she had been trained to rule. But now she was faced with a truth that challenged everything she had been taught. A human, a soldier from a distant world, carried within him the legacy of a warrior who had toppled an empire similar to hers. I'm not here to cause trouble, Marcus said. I'm here because we have no choice. The galaxy is on the brink of war. The factions are growing stronger. My people are getting involved, and so are yours. If we don't work together, everything we know will be destroyed. Alara took a step back, crossing her arms over her chest. You think the galaxy is on the brink of war? You think that because of this tattoo, because of this bloodline, you can save us all? Marcus's eyes met hers, unwavering. No. But I think that if we work together, if we combine the strength of your people and mine, we might have a chance to stop the war before it begins. The room fell into silence. Alara looked out the window again, her mind clearly racing. Marcus could see that she was struggling to understand, to accept what he was saying. Her empire had been built on strength, on the belief that they were the superior race, that nothing could threaten them. But Marcus was challenging that belief. Finally, Alara spoke, her voice quieter this time. I don't know if I can trust you, Marcus, but I do know one thing. We need to talk more about this. I don't understand your people, your history, but I will. Marcus nodded. And I'll explain everything, if you'll listen. She turned to face him, her eyes filled with determination. I'll listen. But you should know that you're not the only one with a legacy to carry. My people have their own history, their own stories, and I won't let that be forgotten. Marcus couldn't help but admire her strength. Despite the confusion, despite the fear that must have been swirling inside her, Alara stood firm in her beliefs. And maybe, just maybe, that was what they both needed, strength, even in the face of uncertainty. I'm not asking you to forget your past, Marcus said softly. I'm asking you to build a future with mine. Alara nodded slowly. Then we have much to learn from each other. The days that followed were filled with questions. Alara's curiosity about Marcus's tattoo only grew, but the princess knew that the answers weren't going to come easily. Her people had built their empire on pride, power, and history. History that told a different story, one in which humanity was inferior, and their ancestors had been nothing but a threat. Now, in front of her, stood a human who carried a symbol tied to an ancient legend, a legend she had learned as a child. Marcus, too, was on edge. He had never been one to open up about his past, not to anyone. The tattoo, his family's legacy, was something he had buried deep inside, a reminder of the cost of power and the mistakes made by those who came before him. Now, that very mark was being questioned, and he wasn't sure if Alara would ever truly understand. But he had no choice. He had to tell her the truth. The two of them met again in the quiet of the royal gardens. The sky above was clear, and the bright stars twinkled like diamonds, reminding Marcus of home. For a moment he allowed himself to relax, but the weight of the conversation ahead was heavy in his chest. Alara approached him, her eyes still holding that spark of curiosity. She was no longer the confident princess he had met before. Something about the tattoo, something about the power it represented had shaken her to her core. She wasn't sure who Marcus was anymore, or if he was a threat to everything she knew. Marcus, Alara began, her voice softer than before. I need to know the truth. What is this power? Why does your bloodline carry it? How is it possible? Marcus looked at her for a long moment, feeling the burden of her questions. I told you before, he said quietly. My ancestor wasn't just a warrior. He was the last of his kind. The human who faced an empire, a great, powerful empire, and defeated them. But the victory came at a great cost. Aylara's gaze softened. Slightly, but she wasn't satisfied with just half the truth. Tell me more, Marcus. I need to understand how this can be real. How a human could possess the strength to defeat an empire. Tell me what happened. Marcus took a deep breath. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only way forward. The story goes back centuries, long before the galaxy as we know it had been formed. My ancestor was not a king or a ruler, but a soldier, much like myself. He came from a small tribe on Earth, one that had been ignored by the rest of the world. He was strong, yes, but it wasn't just his strength that made him special. He had a will so strong that nothing could break it. Marcus paused, remembering the tales his father had told him as a child. His father had never wanted him to follow in the footsteps of the past, but there was no denying that the bloodline carried something special. The empire he faced was cruel. They ruled over countless planets, and they took what they wanted without mercy. My ancestor wasn't just fighting for his tribe, though. He was fighting for the entire human race, for the future of humanity. He believed that we had something to offer the universe, something that no other species could match. And he wasn't wrong. Alara listened intently, her eyes never leaving Marcus's. But what happened? How did he defeat them? Marcus's eyes darkened. It wasn't a battle fought with armies or weapons. It was a battle of wills, of strength, of mind and spirit. My ancestor challenged the Empire's greatest warrior to a duel, one that no one thought he could win. The Empire's warrior was massive, nearly twice his size, with strength unmatched by any known being. But my ancestor's mind, his determination, was stronger. Marcus's voice grew quieter, as if he were lost in the memory. The duel lasted for hours. My ancestor fought with everything he had, and in the end he defeated the warrior. But the cost was high. In the final moments, he didn't just defeat the warrior physically, he broke him mentally. The Empire's leader, the Emperor, himself, saw that his greatest fighter had been bested, and he knew that his empire's foundation was cracked. That was when the Empire began to fall. Alara stood still, absorbing every word. She couldn't imagine the kind of strength it must have taken for a human to defeat an empire. Her people had always believed in their superiority, and the idea that a single human could bring such destruction was hard to accept. But that's not the end of the story, Marcus continued. After the battle, my ancestor was given the tattoo. It was a mark of his victory, but also a symbol of the weight he carried. The Empire's fall didn't come without consequence. The galaxy became a much darker place after that, and many worlds were left in ruin. My ancestor died shortly after the battle, not from wounds, but from the strain of what he had done. His power was too great, and it burned him from the inside. Alara frowned. So this tattoo, this symbol, carries more than just a story of victory. It carries the pain of an entire galaxy. Marcus nodded. Exactly. My family has carried it for generations, but it's not something we talk about. The power within the tattoo is real, but it's dangerous. It's not something I want to wield. I keep it hidden, not because I'm ashamed of it, but because I know what it can do. I don't want to repeat the mistakes of the past. Alara looked at him, her mind racing. She had been taught that her people were the strongest, that their empire could never fall. But Marcus's words, the weight of his story, made her question everything she had believed. She had always seen humanity as a lesser species, but now, standing before her was a human who had the strength to change the course of history. I don't understand, Marcus, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. How can something so powerful be kept hidden? How can you live with such a legacy? Marcus looked at her, his expression serious. Because, Alara, Sometimes the greatest power is the one that remains silent. I don't want to fight again, I just want to help. To make sure we don't make the same mistakes as my ancestors did. Elara stood still for a moment, her thoughts spinning. The truth behind Marcus's tattoo was more than she had ever imagined. She was starting to see him, not just as a human, but as a symbol of something greater. Maybe together they could change the future. Maybe we can learn something from each other. Elara said slowly, her voice filled with uncertainty but also a hint of hope. Marcus nodded. I hope so. The tension between Marcus and Elara had shifted in the days since their conversation in the royal gardens. Though the question of Marcus's tattoo still hung in the air like an unspoken challenge, a new understanding had started to form between them. Elara's curiosity about the tattoo and its hidden power had not faded, but her attitude toward Marcus had changed. She was no longer just the royal princess who viewed him with suspicion. Now she saw him as someone with a deeper connection to the universe than either of them had realized. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low on Kellerus Prime, Elara and Marcus were summoned to the royal council chambers. The atmosphere was heavy. The air crackled with whispers of an approaching threat. An enemy fleet was rumored to be closing in on the planet. The royal advisors had gathered, their faces grim as they discussed strategies and defenses. Despite Elara's growing connection with Marcus, her role as the princess demanded she focus on the kingdom's survival. The burden of leadership weighed heavily on her shoulders. As she entered the room, Elara's mind raced. The talk of war, the threat of destruction, and the growing sense of fear among her people had taken its toll. She was a leader, and she had always known how to make decisions in times of crisis. But this was different. She couldn't shake the feeling that Marcus's presence on Kellerus Prime, his connection to the ancient power he carried, might be the key to surviving what was to come. The advisors fell silent as she entered, their eyes tracking her every move. They were all waiting for her to speak, to take control of the situation. The enemy fleet will arrive in 2 days, one advisor said, his voice thick with worry. We need to prepare, but we are outnumbered. They will crush us before we have a chance to defend ourselves. Elara's eyes flicked to Marcus, who stood quietly by her side. He had been by her side for days, learning about the military strategies and defenses that kept Kellerus Prime safe. But now, with the enemy so close, it was clear that her people needed something more than just strategy. They needed something extraordinary. Turning to Marcus, Elara spoke quietly, though her words were meant for everyone in the room. Marcus, is it possible that the power you carry, the power in your bloodline, can help us? Can it be used to turn the tide against this enemy? The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Marcus, who had become a symbol of hope, even though he didn't fully understand the depth of what Elara was asking. He had always been a soldier, a man of action, but he had never thought of himself as a weapon. Yet here, he stood being asked to use the very thing he had kept hidden for so long. I don't know if I can do what you're asking, Marcus replied honestly, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. The power my family carries, it's not something I can control easily. I don't know what it is, but it's always been there, deep inside me. It's not something I've ever been able to use on command. Elara looked at him, her eyes filled with both fear and hope. But your ancestor used it to defeat an entire empire. Surely you have the strength to help us. Marcus shook his head. My ancestor's power was different. It was a strength built from the will to protect those he loved. I don't know if I can summon that same strength, especially with so much at stake. But Elara didn't give up. You may not control it yet, but that's why I need you to try. We can't win this war alone. If your bloodline holds the key to our survival, then I will help you unlock it. The council room was silent as the weight of her words settled in. Marcus felt the eyes of the advisors on him, waiting for him to respond. He could feel the pressure, the weight of his family's legacy resting on his shoulders. For the first time in his life, he felt like he wasn't just fighting for himself, but for an entire planet, for an entire species. I'll try, Marcus said finally, but I can't promise anything. Alara nodded, her eyes filled with determination. That's all I ask. The room hummed with tension as Alara and Marcus left the council chamber. Outside, the cool air of the evening surrounded them. Alara's steps were quick, purposeful, and Marcus followed close behind, his mind racing. They stopped at a quiet corner of the palace garden, the soft glow of alien flowers casting an ethereal light around them. Alara turned to Marcus, her voice filled with urgency. Marcus, we have to prepare. The enemy is coming, and if we don't do something, they will wipe us out. We need to unlock this power in you. We need to find a way to make you stronger. Marcus nodded, but he was unsure of how to proceed. How do I even begin? I don't know what this power is or how to use it. It's not like flipping a switch. Alara looked at him with intensity. Start with what you know. Focus on the strength you have, the will to protect. You told me your ancestor fought for something greater than himself. Maybe that's what you need to do. Focus on protecting us, protecting this planet. Marcus closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He could feel it, the stirring inside of him, the power that had always been there, buried deep. He had spent his life running from it, afraid of what it might mean. But now, in this moment, he realized that it was time to face it. As he focused on the thought of protecting Alara and her people, something shifted. It wasn't a sudden rush of power, but a subtle awareness that seemed to awaken within him. He could feel the energy in the air, in the ground beneath his feet, and in his own body. It was as if the universe itself was alive, vibrating with energy, waiting for him to tap into it. Alara watched him closely, her expression a mixture of awe and hope. Slowly, Marcus opened his eyes. He felt different, stronger, more connected to the world around him. I think I can feel it, he said softly, his voice filled with wonder. Alara's eyes sparkled with hope. Good. Now let's see if we can use it. Marcus nodded, his mind already focused on the battle ahead. He wasn't sure if this power could save them, but he knew one thing for certain. It was his only chance to help Alara and her people survive. Together they would face the coming storm. The days following Marcus's awakening to his hidden power passed in a blur of preparation and uncertainty. The enemy fleet was only a day away, and Alara's forces were working around the clock to fortify their defenses. The royal palace was buzzing with activity, yet the air still felt heavy with the weight of the coming storm. Alara spent much of her time overseeing the defense plans, but she couldn't shake the thought of Marcus and the power he had only just begun to understand. She had seen the potential in him, felt the strength that lay dormant within him. But now the time had come to decide if she could truly trust him with the future of her people. She needed him, but the question was, could she count on him? Marcus, for his part, was training hard. He was trying to control the power that surged within him, but it was not something that could be mastered overnight. The strange energy inside him was unpredictable. At times it felt like it was there, a steady presence, and at other times it was distant, slipping through his grasp. Alara had made it clear that his power was the kingdom's last hope. But Marcus couldn't help but feel like a weapon, a tool to be used. The thoughts troubled him, and as he stood on the training grounds that afternoon, he couldn't shake the feeling that the power inside him was something he didn't fully understand. Could he really use it to save Kalara's Prime? Could he control it? Or would it consume him like it had consumed his ancestor? As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden hue across the training field, Alara approached Marcus. Her steps were purposeful, and though her face remained as calm and composed as ever, Marcus could see the worry in her eyes. She was a princess, a leader, but she was also a woman carrying the weight of her entire world on her shoulders. Marcus, she called, out, her voice steady but soft. He turned to face her, his breath heavy from the training. Alara, he said, his voice tired but respectful. I need to know if you're ready, she said, her gaze locking with his. The enemy will be here soon. We have no more time to waste. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow and nodded slowly. I'm ready, he said, though his voice didn't carry the confidence he wanted it to. Alara studied him carefully, her brow furrowed. Are you, though? You say you're ready, but I see doubt in your eyes. Doubt that we don't have the luxury of. Marcus exhaled, his hands clenched into fists. I'm not sure I can do it. The power inside me, it's unpredictable. Sometimes, I feel like I'm in control, but other times it feels like it could tear me apart. How can I trust myself to wield it in battle? How can I trust myself to do what needs to be done? Alara stepped closer, her gaze softening. Marcus, I trust you. I trust that you have the heart of a warrior, and that's what matters most. Your strength is not in the power you hold. It's in your willingness to fight for others, to protect them, no matter the cost. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be willing to fight for us. For me. Her words struck something deep within him. He had always been driven by the desire to protect, to keep others safe. But he had never realized just how much it had shaped him. The same determination that had fueled his ancestor now stirred in him, though he feared it might come at the same cost. I want to help, Marcus said, his voice quiet but firm. I don't want to fail you, Alara. I don't want to fail your people, but I don't know if I can control what's inside me. Alara placed a hand gently on his arm, her touch, warm and reassuring. I know you're scared, but we are all scared. This battle is bigger than any one person, but we can't win it alone. Trust me when I say that you're not alone in this fight, Marcus. You have me. You have all of us. Marcus looked down at her hand on his arm, feeling the sincerity in her words. For the first time in days, the doubt began to fade, replaced by something stronger. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He had come too far. Ilara's voice broke through his thoughts. Marcus, you need to make a choice. You can either stand back and let the enemy destroy everything we've fought for, or you can take a step forward, trust in yourself, and fight with everything you have. Marcus turned to face her, his expression hardening with resolve. I choose to fight, he said, his voice steady now. I'll fight with everything I have. Alara nodded, her eyes reflecting pride. That's all I need from you. The next morning, the royal palace buzzed with activity as the military gathered, preparing for the enemy fleet's arrival. The air was thick with tension as the soldiers and advisors worked tirelessly to make final adjustments to the defenses. Alara stood at the heart of it all, her leadership evident in every decision she made. Marcus joined her at the command center, his expression focused and determined. He had spent the night meditating, trying to calm his mind and connect with the power inside him. It was still a mystery, but he knew now that he could harness it. He just had to trust himself. The sound of alarms filled the air, signaling that the enemy fleet was nearing. The room fell silent as Ilara's advisors looked to her for guidance. Alara turned to Marcus. Are you ready? He nodded, his eyes unwavering. I am. Together they watched as the fleet appeared on the horizon, a dark cloud in the sky. The time had come. Alara raised her voice, her words carrying across the room. We fight together or we fall alone. Let's show them what we're made of. Marcus stood at her side, ready. His body was tense, but his mind was clear. He had made his choice. No matter what happened, he would fight for her people, and for the future. The battle began, and as the enemy closed in, Marcus could feel the power within him stir once more. It was time to see if the strength of his bloodline could change the course of history. The battle raged across the skies of Calaris Prime. The air was thick with the sound of weapons firing, the roar of engines, and the flashing lights of explosions. The enemy fleet, massive and relentless, moved like a storm across the horizon. They were strong, but they had underestimated the power of the planet they sought to conquer. Alara stood at the command center, her eyes fixed on the strategic display. The battle was in full swing, and the enemy had begun their descent toward the planet. Her soldiers fought with everything they had, but she knew the odds were against them. The enemy was simply too powerful, and Calaris Prime's defenses, though strong, could only hold for so long. But there was one thing the enemy didn't account for. Marcus stood at her side, his face grim but determined. The power he had begun to tap into surged within him, and he could feel it. This time, he could control it. He had spent the past few hours channeling his focus, drawing on the strength that had once defeated an empire. He wasn't sure how much of that power he could bring to the surface, but in this moment, he had no choice but to try. "You're ready," Elara said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. She had been watching him closely, and she could see the shift in his expression. The uncertainty was gone. In its place was something stronger: purpose. Marcus nodded, his eyes steady. "I'm ready." The alarm sounded again, signaling that the enemy was closing in fast. Elara turned to her officers, giving them final instructions. "We hold the line for as long as we can, but Marcus, it's time. You know what to do." Marcus didn't reply, but his heart pounded in his chest. He had never felt so alive, so connected to the world around him. The power within him was no longer a burden. It was a part of him, a part that he could control. He could feel the energy in the air, the vibrations of the universe itself. Everything was aligned, everything was in place. As Elara watched him, she felt a mixture of hope and fear. Hope because she knew Marcus had the power to change the tide of the battle, but fear because she knew that if he failed, it would cost them everything. Still, she trusted him. He had proven himself time and time again, and now he was her greatest hope. "Marcus," Elara called, her voice steady. "This is your moment. We're with you." Without another word, Marcus stepped forward, leaving the safety of the command center. He moved toward the edge of the palace where the battle was unfolding in the distance. The wind tugged at his hair as he stood, facing the sky, his hands clenched at his sides. He could feel the power inside him rise, responding to his will, waiting for the command to be unleashed. The enemy fleet had now entered the atmosphere, their ships cutting through the sky like dark blades. They were coming closer, too close. It was time. Marcus closed his eyes, focusing all his energy on the power that surged through him. He reached deep inside, pulling on the strength of his ancestors. The tattoo on his arm burned with warmth as the power grew. It wasn't just physical strength, it was something deeper, something primal. The energy of the universe flowed through him, and for the first time, he felt truly connected to everything around him. His body began to glow with a faint golden light as the power built within him. He raised his arms to the sky, and in that moment everything changed. A blast of energy erupted from him, a wave of force that rippled through the air, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. The enemy fleet faltered, their ships suddenly thrown off course. The sky itself seemed to crack open, as though the power Marcus had summoned had torn the very fabric of reality. The enemy was momentarily disoriented, their communication systems scrambled. Marcus's breath came in shallow gasps, his energy drained, but he didn't stop. He focused again, this time with more purpose, more intent. The power within him was like a flood now, flowing freely, and he guided it with a precision he had never known he possessed. Another wave of energy shot forward, this time striking the enemy ships directly. Several of the lead ships faltered, their shields failing under the intense force. The enemy fleet was losing control. Elara watched from the command center, her heart racing. She could see the impact of Marcus's power on the enemy fleet. It was working. He was doing it. Her hope surged, but so did the fear. What would happen to Marcus once the battle was over? Would he be able to control the power he had unleashed? The enemy fleet continued to retreat, their ships now scattering in every direction. Some were too damaged to escape, while others veered off course, fleeing into the depths of space. It was a victory, a hard-fought one, but a victory nonetheless. The battle began to settle. Marcus collapsed to his knees, the energy of his power finally draining from him. He had given everything he had, and now the world seemed to spin around him. He could hear voices in the distance, but they were muffled, like the sound of waves crashing far away. Elara was at his side in an instant, kneeling beside him. "Marcus," she said softly, her voice filled with concern. "Are you okay?" Marcus looked up at her, his face pale and drenched in sweat, but his eyes were clear. I did it," he said, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "You did," Ilara replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You saved us all." Marcus's smile faded and he looked around at the remnants of the battle. The sky was beginning to clear, the dark clouds dissipating, and the sun's warm light began to shine through. The war was over. They had won. But, as the reality of the victory sank in, Ilara knew that this was just the beginning. The enemy had been defeated, but the questions about Marcus's power, about what he could do, still remained. She looked at him, wondering what the future would hold for them both. "We have a lot to talk about," she said softly, her eyes filled with a mix of admiration and curiosity. Marcus nodded, still trying to catch his breath. "I know. But for now, we have time." Ilara smiled, her eyes reflecting the same hope that had carried them through the battle. Together they had faced the impossible, and now they had the chance to build a future, one that no longer looked uncertain but full of promise. As the day turned to night and the stars began to fill the sky once again, Ilara and Marcus stood side by side, knowing that whatever came next, they would face it together.